Hey guys, welcome back to Breaking the Barrier. I'm your host, Rebel Sjeklocha, back for another week. We've had some really cool individuals sit down with us and share their story here recently, but today we are really in for a treat. Joining us today is Alicia Erickson. She served as Miss Rodeo Canada in 2020 and 2021 due to COVID. She's a social media manager, videographer, content creator, and storyteller at PBR Canada and the Ponoka Stampede. Alicia, thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me, Rebel. I was pretty delighted to get your email the other week.
Awesome. Well, from your extensive resume, it's clear to see that you're on the front lines telling stories and bringing people into the Western world. Where did your love for this industry come from?
Oh, that's kind of a long answer, but sometimes I wonder that myself. It's kind of funny when you become so passionate about something to really dig back to the roots and figure out, like, why do I love this so much? But when I was young, I grew up in town. So both of my parents were raised on grain or cattle operations. And then when they met, they moved into a little town called Trochu, which is in kind of like southeastern Alberta, I guess you could say. So that's where my brother Lucas and I grew up. And from a very young age, like 7 maybe, I was obsessed with horses and wasn't around them at all. I don't know. I just loved picture books. I loved storybooks. I loved anything to do with the Western way of life and cowgirls. And one day when I was probably 7, somewhere along those ways, I reached into one of those old junk drawers that everybody has in their family home. And I pulled out a newspaper, and it was a picture of a girl riding a horse with a little sash. And I think she had a cowboy hat that had the feathers. So it was like a really old school cowboy hat. And I asked my mom at the time, I said, "Who is this? This is really cool." And she said, "That's me. I was the Trochu race meet queen at the time." That's what the rodeo queen was called there. And ever since then, I was very, very obsessed and did everything to try to convince my parents to put me in riding lessons. And then once the world of Facebook and Instagram and all that came up into play in my junior high and high school years, then I was just a connecting Alicia. I connected with everybody, and like rodeo queens, people in the Western way, like barrel racers. I don't know. I've always just been like, always tried to connect myself with the industry.
Absolutely. Well, making the jump from agriculturally facing things to horses and rodeo, for outsiders who aren't involved in the industry, it doesn't seem like that big of a jump. But if your family does not have involvement in horses, I mean, I know your mom did, but that's a big learning curve and takes a lot of commitment on your part to really go the extra mile there.
Yeah. And I always like to say the biggest lesson I probably took from trying to be involved as much in the Western lifestyle as I could is when you are willing to learn and you show the extra effort and you make the extra mile, people are usually willing to help you. The right people are. And that's truly what I can say has helped me the most is people. And I think maybe that's why I love people. I love telling their stories. And then I love the Western industry as a whole. So that's probably where that came from.
For sure. Well, you really took that to the extreme extent and really committed and worked hard to win the title of Miss Rodeo Canada in 2020. Briefly talk about that experience and kind of how that impacted the trajectory of where you are now.
Yeah, when I was 16 maybe, my dad asked me, we had a Europe trip in high school. So he said, either I can help you pay to go on your Europe trip over Easter break, or I can help you buy a horse trailer. And I was like, horse trailer sold all the way. I don't really care to go to Europe. Which now I'm like, I really want to explore Europe one day, but that wasn't meant to be then. So I got a little 2-horse Logan Coach bumper pull.
Love
and
it.
I had a horse by that time. I had my horse I still have now, Allie. And I saw in a newspaper clipping, believe it or not, it wasn't a Facebook ad. I saw a rodeo queen competition ad for Carstairs, Alberta. And I entered it because I had a horse trailer and I had my horse, and I was like, I can do this. I got my license. So that was the very first title I held, was the Carstairs Rodeo Queen. I jumped from there into the Hannah Pro Rodeo Queen and then the Ponoka Stampede, which is where I find myself working a lot now and absolutely love that committee and town. And then Miss Rodeo Canada. I ran for Miss Rodeo Canada. That was the big goal at the end of the entire thing. I remember I always used to think to myself, okay, when I win Miss Rodeo Canada, I'm good. I can go on to work whatever I want in whatever industry, and that'll be like the cutoff, or that'll be the goal. If I do that, then that's the end of it. That's what I really want to do. And then when I ran my first year in 2018, I ran for Miss Rodeo Canada 2019. I didn't win, and that was the first rodeo queen competition that I had lost. I had lost a lot previously in different things. Just not rodeo queen, track and field, sports, different things. I was a pretty good loser, if we want to but not when it came to rodeo queening, because that's something that I took so seriously. And I just mentally was not prepared to lose at all. So I lost in 2018, the fall of 2018 for 2019's title, and Jade and Holly won. And I remember, for whatever reason, we all get to kind of walk up to the crowning reception after, and I remember just looking at Jaden and saying, if you I'm sad right now, but I'm really, really happy for you, and if you ever need anything throughout your year, please let me know. Lots of clothes, lots of everything, stay at my house, whatever. And I will never ever regret doing that. As hard as it was in the moment, I will never regret doing that, because I ended up running for Miss Rodeo Canada the next year. And I thanked my judges before I left the previous year and asked them if there was anything, at a later date, I asked them if there was anything that they would suggest I improve on or work on. And it honestly all came down to not being myself, not being comfortable, and just trying to be too polished is what it was. So I took a year, came back, won in 2020, and then Jordan Tierney, Miss Rodeo America, the same time as me, and one of my best friends now. I remember saying to her when COVID kind of struck, and I think she was on her way to Houston, and I think I was trying to go there too. Never made it. I said, what if they ask us to do 2 years, Jordan? She's like, there's no way. They won't ask us to do 2 years. And then they did. So it's kind of funny how that all worked out. But
yeah. Very cool. Well, it was certainly fun to follow along with both you and Jordan throughout that time. I know that was trying for lots of people, but you handled it beautifully. So it's really cool to see you in that role, and then to watch your career blossom in other ways after the crown, which, as a rodeo queen myself, or a former rodeo queen, it is really easy to get caught up on the one goal of this is what I want to accomplish. Yeah. And then after I get to that point, it's almost like we forget that there's hopefully 70 years of life after.
There's so much life
something
to
in our
live. And
in our early
that's the funny
20s.
thing in anything. Even rodeo competitors, rodeo athletes, you are so fixated on your one goal, whatever it is you may be set, if it's a small goal or a large goal. You're so fixated on that one thing that when it doesn't go the way you want it to, it's like, what do I do?
Yeah.
We don't often prepare ourselves for a plan B.
For sure. So after 2 years, I can only imagine that you were probably ready for a transition in life at that point in time. That's a big commitment to hold for so long. What was your mindset like when you were trying to figure out, okay, this was a good experience, but I need to figure out what's next for me?
I honestly remember being in an airport in August, and I was sitting there just kind of minding my own business, really tired. I was on a long trek of rodeos, and this man was sitting kind of across from me, and he was staring. Obviously, he was staring. I had a hat and crown and everything on, and I was in one of those moods where you just didn't want to talk to anybody. But, you have to.
Yes.
It's like, no, I'm just going to open myself up and talk. So I went and sat beside him, and we got chatting, and he was one of the major sponsors for the rodeo I was at. And he said, I can't believe what you girls do. That's incredible. That must be a high-paying job. And I said, actually, it's 365 days, or in my fact, 2 years of a full volunteer commitment. Can't be going to school, can't really work because you can't take the time off to do that. And he said, well, how? He's a businessman, entrepreneur from a young age. And he said, how are you going to take this experience and capitalize on it and make money or gain something from it? I said, well, I gain a lot from it, just with the experiences. I said, I don't really know how I'm going to capitalize on making money from it. And he said, well, what are you good at? What have you been doing? I said, social media, because it's the only thing I can do or could do for a year and a half. So I showed it to him. He said, wow, that's really good. Let me show you my social media. He showed it to me. They rent out all sorts of different things, light towers, shacks, that kind of stuff. And I looked at it and I said, well, this is great, but do you think you're really selling equipment and rentals off of your social media, or is it the connections you have already? He said, nope. It's the connections I have already. I said, well, then what's your point of social media if you're not making money off of it? Like, you're asking me the same question. And he said, that's a good question. I said, well, you sponsor this rodeo and you must sponsor a lot of other people. Why don't you make it more about community involvement and the different organizations you work with? So he fired his people and hired me to manage his social media basically that day. It took like a week and a half, but yeah, he hired me. And from there on out, I was like, I didn't have a lot of faith in myself that I knew what I was doing, and I was very honest with him. But he has helped me build my business into what it is today, and for that, I'm very grateful.
Yeah, that's so. The funniest part about this whole story is that it's someone that you did not want to talk to, because rodeo queen or not, everyone's been in that position where you have this obligatory conversation, and then it, turns out to be something cool. So I love that. And
I stress this in any clinics that I've helped teach or whatever in the past with girls that are in rodeo queen roles, or maybe it's just a young woman that's trying to grow as a person. You never know the type of opportunities that are going to come from people that you least expect. People, places, experiences, whatever it might be. And I've stayed true to that since the very beginning with Miss Rodeo Canada. And that has been the one thing that I've lived by that has opened so many doors for me. It's not necessarily based on my experience that I get hired for things, but it's because sometimes my personality and the way I'm willing to work with people and open up, the way that you react and the way that you treat people is a huge asset. And it can be an asset, or it can hinder you. So you've got to really take it and embrace it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so after this encounter, you were kind of sparked, if you will, to pursue the social media path. How did your business grow from that point? Or, what were you thinking at that point in terms of scaling it and getting more clients?
So after that, I went to Vegas. Shortly after, I went for my last hurrah as Miss Rodeo Canada. And I was in the Montana Silversmiths booth, and I really love those people. I love Judy Wagner. I love Callie Adams, and I really wanted to get a job with them. But as you know, it was kind of hard. I'm a Canadian, and they're an American-based company out of Montana. So I really wanted to work for them, and I remember probably thinking it wasn't going to work, but being able to work with them in a different capacity. And I was signing autographs in their booth, and a Canadian professional trick rider named Bella DaCosta and her mom walked up because she was performing at the junior final, the rough stock finals. And her mom came up to me and said, "You do an incredible job at your social media. Would you ever be interested in taking on clients?" I was like, that's interesting. And I talked with Bella, and so they were my second client, Bella DaCosta, and I grew her Instagram and social media following from, I want to say 500 to, I think we're at 279,000 followers.
Wow.
And obviously I can only do so much. She's an incredible person, and her lifestyle is so easy to share. And it's so interesting and so unique and so cool. And that's something that I say to all my social media clients now is we often live a life that we take for granted and other people find so unique in the Western way of life. So we have to be able to take the tidbits that we think are boring or wouldn't be exciting to somebody and share them in the right light, because that's how we share our story and we educate others. And that's what I did with Bella, and that girl she's done amazing things ever since. So that was directly after. And then I didn't know, I had those two clients and I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I went and looked at my taxes the other day, like from 2022. How did I eat? Because I moved out from my dad's house right after I was done Miss Rodeo Canada, moved out on my own and just was doing this business and had 2 or 3 clients, and then was doing stuff on the weekends on the side, just kind of taking video or photo or whatever. I don't know how I ate food. I don't know how I lived. But it's grown. It's grown tremendously since then.
That's so cool.
You gotta have a dream.
Well, what I'm really hearing from what you're saying is that you took a bet on yourself, and that bet is paying off. To go from being a little uncertain in the airport, talking to a stranger, to growing a social media following by hundreds of thousands of people, there has to be kind of a newfound confidence with that. I'm sure that that's from the knowledge and tools you gained along the way, but I'm sure that process wasn't always easy.
No, and the thing is, too, being your own boss and working for other people, you're holding them accountable. You're holding them accountable for their work. You're setting expectations. And I don't have an education in social media management or any of that stuff. I went to school for youth justice studies, and that's still something that I want to pursue later on in life. But I was not ready for starting my own business, and I never viewed myself as an entrepreneur. Ever. I always loved working under the leadership of other people forever and ever and ever. And I just, for some reason, felt that there was less responsibility. You could work a 9 to 5 and you shut yourself off at the door. And I've worked different positions as a figure skating coach where you did have to take a little bit of homework done, but when you left the rink, for the most part, it was done. And this is a completely different avenue. And I have had some struggles and some trials and tribulations because I am a very free, creative, artistic person, not necessarily a business mindset or an entrepreneur, but this is for some reason the path that God's put me on, and I have embraced it every step of the way. But it's really helped me build character, to say the least, because I hardly can hold myself accountable at the best of times. And now I'm holding 10 different social media accounts accountable, and different organizations and people. And it's something that I never, ever would have dreamt of. But I think it goes to show that sometimes talent, or whatever you want to call it, isn't necessarily your strongest asset. It's consistency that pays off in the long run. Mm-hmm. And when you hold yourself accountable to the things you know that you want to be successful at, being consistent and breaking the barrier and doing the things every day that don't necessarily makes sense in the moment or not that you want to do, and just being consistent and holding yourself to that really pays off. And I'm a completely different person than I was when I was Miss Rodeo Canada now.
Yeah. Well, I think when you look at entrepreneurship, there's always the first thing that comes to mind is you need an idea, or you need something that's marketable, or that will work. But then I think people fail to take into consideration all of the other work that goes on behind the scenes, like pricing yourself, marketing yourself, like getting the clients. Like I would venture to say that once you get the client, you feel in your element and you can, do what you want to. But there's so many other facets, especially when you're kind of, you don't have your business is you at this stage. So what has been the biggest learning curve in that regard that you've had to kind of work through?
You and I were just talking about that previously. It's being able to say no. And that's something that I've struggled with for a long time. I'm naturally a very compassionate, empathetic person. And so saying no to something that might seem small to me is really challenging. And I've learned in business that it's okay to say no to people, and you have to say no to people. And I've really learned to judge the people and the businesses and the operations that I'm going to work well with as an individual, because you're not going to work well with people. And it's okay to say no to taking on a client if you don't think that they're a right match for what you do. Sometimes it isn't about the money, or it isn't about the status. It's about making sure that you're going to do a good job in the long run, and that your client on the flip page is happy with what you do. And sometimes just naturally there are people that you will not work well with. And that has been a hard pill to swallow for me, because I'm a perfectionist and I want people to like me. I am a people pleaser day in and day out. If somebody doesn't like me and I can't understand why, I will lose sleep at night. But that's something that you cannot think about in business sometimes. And in the last couple of years, I've had some great mentors in business and in the Western way of life that have really helped hold me accountable to that and push past it. And I've now at the point where I have had to say no, or I've said no, and honestly, it's a pretty good feeling.
That's awesome. Like, good for you.
Yeah.
So if someone's listening to this and they're wondering what the experience would be like, maybe they're looking to grow their business or their brand, what is the experience of working with you like, and what does kind of the day-to-day operations of what you do look like?
I would say be ready for phone calls at late hours and early hours of the morning. When I get an idea in my head, I'm the person that has a notebook at my nightstand or a notebook in the dash of my truck, because when I get an idea, all of a sudden my mind is just like fluttering with excitement and branching off into other things. And so when I work with my clients, it's not a standard. This is something that's not unique to, or that's not set to social media managers or content creators. A lot of people have, strict pricing and strict schedules and strict things that they hold their accounts to. I don't. And I tell people that when I start working with them, I'm very, very different. And maybe I need to be more that way. Maybe I'd grow more that way, but I'm really happy with what I do now. I'm very, I cater to my clients a lot. I really care about them, and I care about seeing their success. And so I don't work 9 to 5. I work like 24 hours round. And when I get an idea, I don't know. I'm so passionate about what I do that I think that's why I've been able to create the relationship with the clients that I have now.
To what you were speaking about earlier about the 9 to 5 and kind of being able to check things at the door when you leave the office, I think the freedom you're afforded as an entrepreneur has its own set of perks, but also, as you're mentioning, kind of is a double-edged sword because you're never quite off the hook. What makes it worth it for you to be on that sort of schedule, or on call, as we'll call it that?
Well, I should say that I do try to turn my phone off. And that's another big lesson that I've had to learn in this industry, is being able to shut the phone off and have hours to myself and to the people that I love and the people that are supporting me, because it's a really easy industry to become self-involved in. Because when you start to see things grow, whether it's you or it's your business or whatever it is, it's really easy to just shut off and be so tunnel visioned. And I've noticed that in the last little while. I've seen growth in my business and I've been so excited, and that's great. But it's really easy to just shut other people off that are usually the ones that are your cheerleaders. And so it's really important to acknowledge that there's a time for business and there's a time for shutting off and being yourself and being with the people you love and giving them 50% too. Like it's okay. I find that I'm able to build better connections and relationships with people because I don't just shut them off at a certain time. And I used to be the worst person at replying ever. I would leave my phone in the house and go ride my horses and whatever. And you have to do that sometimes, of course. Then I'd respond like 3 weeks later,
Yeah.
I was terrible. But that's something that one of my business coaches has mentioned to me. You can't do that when you're self-employed. You have to respond to people, whether it's a simple no, a yes, or a thumbs up. It's really important that they feel heard at all times. And if you can't respond to somebody right away, just send them a note and let them know, if you're driving or whatever. And I didn't understand the value in that until I practiced it for quite a long time. And I noticed my relationships were stronger with people and people respected me more. So that's something that I've learned as well in trying to keep to that 9 to 5, but also making sure that you respond to people.
That's a hard habit to break, the not responding right away situation. And I think it's probably in particular with, no, I don't want to call them older people, adults that are older than I or us in general. Like I've had a few interactions, and granted, these were with family members, not clients, where they sent me something, but I didn't think it warranted a response. Like I thought that was kind of the end of our conversation. But again, if I would have sent just a thumbs up or something of that sort, they would have felt much more acknowledged in that interaction. Yeah. But it's so hard to navigate online relationships. Anyway, that's my little soapbox. But
No, it really is. And I was talking to my grandma on the phone yesterday, and she's 92 this year, and she's sharp as a tack. She, every weekend, she asks me, "Did you write your thank you cards?" And she's a lady that my grandpa and her used to write hundreds of Christmas cards, handwritten, handmade, every single year and send them out. And that's something that I feel has been really lost in today's age. And she has always been so mindful of making sure that you say thank you to people that have done something for you, or maybe not. Maybe it's just acknowledging them or acknowledging an event that you worked at. And regardless of if the card's going to get thrown out, you did it. And she said to me yesterday, "Alicia, sometimes the smallest things mean the most to people, and you need to make sure that you're writing your cards." I said, "Okay, Grandma, they might come in a form of a text, but I will write my card."
That's so difficult. I feel like a stalker sometimes when I message people and ask for their home address or their mailing address, at least.
I know.
But I love snail mail. It's honestly kind of fun and satisfying to send out. But stamps just went up in price, I guess, in the U.S. So RIP to us. But anyway, in addition to the work you do with social media, you're also heavily involved with PBR Canada and the Ponoka Stampede. Could you elaborate on what you do for both of those organizations?
The Ponoka Stampede was the first sideline interview job that I did in my career with my business. So prior to that, I had only ever really been on a mic once interviewing people, and that was at the NFR in 2020 in Arlington. And Jordan, Miss Rodeo American, and I got to interview the breakaway ropers for the Rainbow Network, which was really cool, super scary and nerve-wracking, but I did love it. And after I was done Miss Rodeo Canada, so I finished my reign in December of 2021. Wow, I'm aging myself. That's so weird. I spent the next couple of months growing my business, adding social media clients. I think I had 2 or 3, which wasn't a whole heck of a lot. And then springtime came and Ponoka Stampede was coming around the corner, and I had the opportunity to help with some social media stuff, which was great. And then one of the committee members, Trevor, who I work for in like 5 different capacities now, he called me maybe a week before Ponoka Stampede and said, "Would you be interested in doing some sideline interviews? We think we want to add that to our show this year." And I said, "Yes," because that's what you do. You open doors and you say yes to things, even if they scare you. And then I went and bought, get this, I went to the camera store, which is like the mecca of camera stores in Calgary. And I bought a $3,500 camera because I was going to need it to film what I was doing. And I put it all on my MasterCard, and I had no idea how I was going to pay it off. But I just trusted that I was going to be able to.
I love that.
So I went and worked the Ponoka Stampede, and that was my first gig, and that paid off my camera. And that was probably one of the most eye-opening experiences, because sometimes when we walk into a place for a job, especially when you work a 9 to 5 or when you're working under people, you expect that they will have things laid out for you. You expect that you will have guidelines, you will have your list of to-dos for the day, and you just go with it and you do the job and you leave. But that's not the case, and especially when rodeos are branching out and trying something new. For example, being a sideline reporter and doing these interviews, they'd never done that before, and neither had I. And so it was a really eye-opening experience for, you're not done when the rodeo's over. You got to go and brainstorm how you can make it better for the next day. And that was a lot of work because I was trying to navigate. I was using my camera for shooting kind of some separate interviews that weren't necessarily on the Cowboy Channel for the actual rodeo stream. So I was trying to learn and navigate that, being present for the rodeo, studying the different athletes, learning how to put an interview together, because I had never actually done one from start to finish, from the how did it go to the congratulations. And then I think I probably got 2 hours of sleep every night because I was editing videos in between. And
living the dream.
So eye-opening. Oh, yeah. And then I was staying, where was I staying? In a trailer. I think my boyfriend brought his trailer up for me so I could stay in it. And yeah, no Wi-Fi, using my phone to try to hotspot my laptop.
Oh, bless your heart. Oh, no.
But I learned so much from that experience that they gave me. I never I never could have imagined what that week taught me. And I think it really goes to show that when sometimes things get hard, or you get frustrated, or you get tired, oftentimes it's obviously important to know your limits and make sure that your mental health and everything is in check, but not being afraid to push yourself to the next step and getting past the tough parts and just keep rolling on the train, because there was a lot of times that I felt so defeated that first time. And if I would have quit, which would have been really easy for me to do, I never would have been doing what I'm doing now. And so that week taught me a lot. And after that, a couple days later, I got a call from a man named Jason Davidson, who's the general manager of the PBR. And he also has his own company called 3D Bull Riding. And he is the agent for like Zeke Thurston, Stetson, like all the Wright brothers. He has a lot of guys under his roster. And he said, I heard you did a good job in Ponoka. I'm not really sure who you are, but I'd like to invite you to come do a PBR Canada Cup Series event in Kelowna, British Columbia. Would you be available next week? And then my eyes buck out. I'm like, this guy's called, Jason's calling me for PBR. I was so excited. And I had no idea what to expect. And I said, yes. I said, yes. I didn't know how to price myself. I tried pricing myself. It was low. And now that I've learned, and they flew me out there, and I did a 1-day event for them, which was broadcasted on TSN2, which is one of our TV channels here in Canada. And that was also a very eye-opening experience for me, but I absolutely loved it. Had no idea what I was doing. Never had had a pack or put an earpiece in, or had people talking in my ears as I was trying to interview and say that again, or this guy got an 88-point ride, bring it up as you're in the middle of a question, you know, and that can be so hard to navigate. But I just did it. I just did it. And after that, I was just filling in for somebody, for now my co-host in PBR Canada, Scott Byrne. I was just filling in for him, and that turned into, I loved it. I loved every moment of it. So I tried to work for the company that streamed it, which is called Feature Productions, and they do all the video work. So I went and worked for them at some PBRs because they didn't have room for me doing any sideline reporting. So I went and videoed. I did B-roll, edited it, sent them stuff, and that's how I kind of made money and was still there saying hi to everybody every week. And before I knew it, the following year in the spring, I got a call, and Pete Jabrod, who's kind of like the live production manager, said, Alicia, we want to make room for you on the show. What do you think about doing a live segment before our show every day called Canadian Dirt, where we look at the behind the scenes? And I said, yes. And that grew into the sideline reporting, and it just grew into, now I work full time on their Elite Cup Tour series. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'll say you have lots of irons in the fire. That's for sure. The overarching theme of this whole episode is just persistence to me. That's what I'm taking away from it. But what was the adjustment like from, obviously there's overlap between bull riding and traditional rodeo, but the stark contrast from a rodeo like the Ponoka Stampede to a fully produced bull riding event is no joke. So I can imagine that there was kind of an adjustment there too.
It's a lot different. And learning to work with PBR, now it's basically, PBR is such a well-tuned machine. A well-oiled machine, however you want to say it. Their production is down to the second. And so is a rodeo like Ponoka Stampede, but there's a lot more variables when it comes to a fully produced rodeo compared to a PBR, where you got 25 to 30 guys. They're all getting on one bull, and, maybe 10 bulls in the championship round, depending on the format of the event. But it's a lot different, especially because PBR Canada with this Elite Cup Series, same people every single time. So it never differs. I work with the same team of people. We go to the same restaurants after every show. We do the exact same things. It's like, and the only thing that, there does run into issues with shows. We were in Ottawa in June, and the fire alarm got set off in the building, and it somehow overrode the audio system. And so we had no audio for the first half of our show and had to improvise and do all sorts of things. And that's when Brinson James came into play and just completely was a rock star and helped us with everything. But there's a lot of different variables that can happen in PBR, but I would say for the most part, it's a super well-oiled machine, same people, same athletes for the most part. And so it's easy for me to follow their stories. I do it every single weekend. I know these guys day in, day out. I know the bulls because it's the same stock contractors most of the time. So it's easy for me to kind of put the stories together, whereas I jump into a rodeo like the Ponoka Stampede, and that is a huge event. Athletes from all across the world, Brazil, Canada, United States of America, you name it. And some people that I've never met before. You're studying hundreds of athletes and trying to, and that's your job, right? It's your job to be able to know them. When you have to, you can ask them a couple questions before an interview, but I like to get all of my homework done before, so I know who I'm looking for. I might have never met them before, but I've seen your face on your bio on the PRCA site, or I've studied your Facebook, and that sounds a little bit creepy, but it's your job. It's your job.
Yeah.
But it's tough. I run from one end to the complete opposite end, and sometimes I'm hardly there before an event starts because it's such a widespread. I said next year I'm gonna have to get a scooter for me and the gal.
You might as well.
Yeah,
get one of those hoverboards like the cool kids.
Oh yeah, but I love rodeo, and that's where I love bull riding as well, and I never thought I'd love it as much as I do. But rodeo is just so unique in the different stories that come with it, with people and stories and upbringings and horses, and there's a lot of different variables. So yeah, the two are very different, and sometimes it is hard to adjust, but that's my job.
Yeah,
so
most definitely.
Yeah.
Well, your career is obviously just gaining traction by the day. What are some goals that you have for yourself, either in the short term or long term, that you're kind of looking ahead to?
Oh, that's a good question. I always preach to people that it's really important to set goals and to write them down and to have them set in front of you. But I often find myself backtracking and not doing that personally. So I've lived so day to day for the last 3 years that I haven't wrote down a lot of goals. I've had them in my mind and I think about them all the time. And it's funny how the ones that I think about and visualize myself in have came true through opportunity. But I would say I was talking to Kate Harrison, which she's an absolutely phenomenal standout in our game, especially in PBR. She's incredible. She just announced the rodeo in Calgary at the Calgary Stampede, and obviously you'd recognize her voice from PBR. But she said to me, Alicia, I was worried about something I said or the way that I asked a question. And she said, well, how did the athlete answer it? I said, they did a great job in answering it. And she goes, that's all that matters. It doesn't honestly matter the way you ask the question. What you should be worried about is if you're setting the athlete up or whoever you're interviewing to respond with something that they would be happy with or proud of, or that a story that you're happy with. And so that I've thought about that ever since. Like, this job is not about me. It's not about how I look. It's not about what I wear. It's not about how I sound. Yes, that's all really important, and image is important in a way. You're setting a standard, and you're also just like being a rodeo queen, you are a role model, regardless of if you view it that way or not. And so that is very important, but it's really easy to get sidetracked with that and not realize that the person, your biggest job is interviewing the person beside you and setting them up for success. And regardless of if it's their first time doing an interview and they're going to give you 2 words, and you know that, well, then you better set them up and not ask them a question where they can just go yes or no. And that's something that I've struggled with. So I've set a lot of small goals in the last little while, because in this last 2 months, this is the most I've ever had the opportunity to interview people. I usually get a weekend of doing it with PBR, and then a month goes by or 2 months goes by. So it's really hard to get those opportunities in Canada. You have to make them. But I was able to go from our Eastern tour, where we had 4 different stops, straight into Innisfail Pro Rodeo, to the Ponoka Stampede, to Cody Snyder's Bull Bustin' in Calgary, to the Calgary Stampede, into Kelowna PBR. And like yesterday was my first day off in 30 some days. And
wow.
I've set a lot of small goals within that, because I used to be so nervous that I would mess something up or I would say something that I would regret, that I wouldn't have fun in what I was actually doing. And when the show was done or the interview was done, all I could think in my mind was, whew, like that went good. That's all I care about. Let's go into the next one, or let's just, but now for some reason in the last couple of weeks, months maybe, all I can think about is, okay, how could I have made that person answer that better? How could I have given them the tools to be able to tell their story better? And it's almost like this passion inside of me that drives me to just like go on to the next thing. As soon as I'm done a show, I record. It might be mentally throughout the show, but I record what I think I could have done better and I work on it. It's not being too hard on myself. It's not being negative. It's no, I want to be the best I can at my job. And I want to do it for the athletes and the people that I'm interviewing so I can tell their story. So that's been a big goal of mine.
Yeah.
I guess it might sound small, but it's big in the long term, because it's hard to be able to get the format and to be able to adjust in a 30-second interview and change things, and it's challenging.
Well,
so
you don't have
one.
Sorry, not to cut you off. It's difficult when you don't have, and some of these people you may know, of course, but when you don't have rapport with someone and then you jump into asking them questions, that can be really difficult. But I see all the approaches you're taking is very action oriented, and that's really the only way. A goal doesn't do much good if it gets written down and nothing else. So
that's
props
true.
to you.
It's also okay to be able to change. You might set a goal and you might be working towards it, but it's okay to change with what's thrown at you. Like, okay, I don't like that was the goal I set, but this is coming the way, or this is when a different route. It's okay to change the original goal that you had. And it's also okay to give yourself more time, because I often find myself not living in the moment. And I really try to, this is something I've done in the last couple of months, is I try to take the openings, for example. We do a live show and some interviews before a PBR. Then there's a big opening where they got pyro and they do the anthem and they introduce all the athletes up onto the stage. And I take that moment and I just watch it. And I watch people and I take it in and I watch their reactions and the new places we are and the crowds that we're at and how much people are enjoying that. And I think to myself, regardless of how many times I get to see this or do this, I want to feel like those people in the stands every single time. And when we get into a mindset of thinking like that and being positive about it, it never gets boring. It never gets repetitive. It's unique every single time. And I don't know, that's something that I pride myself in is trying to live in the moment and setting those things aside so that I can actually enjoy it almost like a spectator sometimes. Because it's you're working, but I find myself to be, instead of 70% or 75%, I'm at 90% if I'm actually enjoying it and having fun and taking the time to listen.
Mm-hmm. That's super great advice. Well, as you kind of look back on the different stepping stones that you've been through in the last few years, who are some of your most influential mentors that have kind of guided you along the way?
Oh, gosh. There is a lot. I have a lot of different mentors and a lot of different people in different areas. So if I had to say in business, Jason Davidson, who was the original guy that hired me for PBR Canada, he's been one of my big mentors in business and kind of in life. I actually work for him now with his agency, 3D Bull Riding, and they brought me on with him and Tanner Byrne a couple of months ago, maybe a month and a half ago. And Jason's good. I really enjoy getting perspectives from both men and women in business, not entrepreneurs, whatever it might be, all walks of life. And he has taught me the importance of just getting shit done. I hope it's okay that I swore, but that
I love it.
He will work so hard for a client to make sure that they get the right deal and go above and beyond and just making sure that he does things right and does things on time and holds himself accountable. So I've learned that from him. I'd say another woman in the Western industry that was a past Miss Rodeo Canada and now is kind of branched off. She works for C5 Rodeo. Her name's Jillian Grant. She was Jillian Shields when she was Miss Rodeo Canada. She's been a huge mentor to me. She brought me on with C5 Rodeo. That's another company that I work for. And she told me, Alicia, you're so focused and fixated on just working. When I was done Miss Rodeo Canada, I just wanted to work for somebody, right? Like work full time, make the money, and just like work for one person. And I remember being mad at her because she said, we're not going to hire you full time for C5 Rodeo. Like, you need to just do contract work. You're a type of person that can do contract work. And that's something that she learned in her career. And I remember just being like, Jillian, how am I supposed to get started making paycheck by paycheck and not even like, I need a full-time job and a salary. And she said, no, you're gonna see. And it took about a year. And I remember thinking back to that conversation with Jillian and like, holy smokes, I'm so glad that she didn't let me just give myself to one person or one organization, because that has been the biggest game changer in my life and my career, is being able to work with multiple people at the same time.
Yeah. So for anyone who's listening to this, whether it's young women or professionals who are maybe looking to take a different approach in their career, what is the biggest piece of advice that you would offer them, or offer anyone for that matter, looking to be successful in either the Western industry or the career path of their choosing?
Ooh.
That was a really long worded way of asking you that question.
I think in general, you have to be happy with what you're doing. You read little quotes all the time, like if you're having fun at what you do, or you're having fun at work, you don't work a day in your life. Or if you love what you do, you don't work. Whatever those quotes are, and that's true to some extent, I think. But I think it's important to never settle. That's something that when I was a rodeo queen, I remember I'd go to places and I'd be sitting on my horse in the arena doing chase out, feeling like really happy with what I was doing and thinking to myself, like, okay, what could I do at this event what can I capitalize on here that could help me later on in the future? And I might have been really tired or not wanting to do something, but I would like message random people or different rodeo athletes that have been doing good and ask them if they could do an interview, or ask them if they could do something behind the scenes, because I always wanted to do the next thing. I was like so fixated on like just being busy and never just resting and enjoying what I was doing. And I think that's carried on into my work because and in my career, because I never really feel settled. And I think it's important to not feel settled and to always think about the next thing, but also appreciate the stepping stones and where you've grown. Because if you can appreciate what you've done yourself, then I think that's where your happiness starts to leak out. You can have as many cheerleaders as you want in life, but if you're not your own cheerleader, I think that can drain your bucket. And it's okay to give yourself a pat on the back. So I don't know. I think one of my biggest pieces of advice is to always strive for more, never settle, and always be looking for the next opportunity. But at the same time, remember where you came from, remember where you started, and give yourself the pat on the back and appreciate all the hard work you've done. That's a lot of different pieces, but
all good ones.
I think about them on the daily.
Yeah. Well, we've covered a lot of ground today. Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you'd like people to know?
I don't think so. I'm pretty much an open book. And I'm pretty good at interviewing people, but I don't know if I'm good at being interviewed myself. So I get on little tangents and in rabbit holes, but I really appreciate the well thought out questions that you asked me. And if there's anybody out there that has more questions or wants more insight on what I actually do and and maybe some struggles or some of the good things that I've learned from starting my business and the growth that's went on. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions. And of course, I'm always learning too. So not the end all be all.
Well, before I let you go, why don't you tell people how they can connect with you online?
Sure. Yeah, my social media account, I'd say Instagram is the most active with business. So it's just at socially Alicia. And that's where you can kind of follow my stories, whether it's at a bull riding or a rodeo or just creating content for the really cool people, places, and experiences that I get to be a part of. That's mostly where I do all my updates. And on there, I have my email and stuff as well. So if you want to reach out, I'd be more than happy to answer and chat with you.
Awesome. Well, Alicia, thank you so much for your time today. I have enjoyed this conversation, and I'm really excited to share it with our listeners.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Rebel.